Yo, what's up? You probably saw the thumbnail of this video, at least I hope you did. I'll be ranking every Tour City track in Mario Kart 8. All these tracks will be played on 200cc, they'll be judged using that in mind. They have to represent the real life city well. Overall, they just have to be fun and well designed. So without any further ado, let's just jump into it. 14. Tokyo Blur. I'm not gonna lie, but this track might be the most boring track in the game. There's nothing of substance holding this track together. There might be some famous landmarks in there, but every other track has them. But Tokyo just feels empty and slow because half the time you're driving on long boring straightaways with extremely light turns. Also, there is a very substantial lack of item boxes around the track, especially in the final lap in the highway section. There's some thwomps around the track and a final gliding segment at the very end. The music's alright though, but even in 200cc, it still feels very slow. And there's a singular shortcut. The track is also completely linear. There's no question where this track goes. Dead last. 13. Paris Promenade. Yes, the first two Tour City tracks are also the worst. Paris suffers mostly the same problems as Tokyo did, but to a much lesser extent, as it's got some nice shortcuts and alternate routes. And some famous monuments, such as the Eiffel Tower and Arc de Triomphe, are used in alright ways, but not much further than that. This track is also the first city course to introduce the alternating lap mechanic that every other Tour City track uses. In this case, you'll go backwards in the final lap, and if you're front running, you could potentially screw other players up. The music fits, but it's a bit boring. I'd say that the only truly bad city course was Tokyo. Paris is just okay. 12. Bangkok Rush. Never liked this track really. Most tracks are somewhat reworked to function in Mario Kart 8. Bangkok just feels cramped and doesn't let you drive very enjoyably, even in 150cc, and the graphics are kind of bad. Most of them have this issue, but this one especially does. Although this track does have a lot of set pieces and different areas rather than just roads and buildings. You're driving through tram tracks, markets, through skyscrapers, and you can make some sick jumps. But that one building ascent really didn't add anything of importance to the track. The bouncing tents were fun, and so was the gliding segment. It probably deserves a high position, but I have a grueling hatred towards this track that I cannot ignore. 11. New York Minute. This was the very first city course to be introduced in Mario Kart Tour. Man, does it feel like it. What I mean by that is that it feels very small scaled compared to later tour tracks, which is a bit strange because New York is bloody massive. However, this has a bit of the charm that tracks like Delfino Square have. The track goes through Central Park and it's got some decent shortcuts, and in the end you could go in the Empire State Building and finish the race there. However, overall it could have been a bit more ambitious with the track layout. It feels very flat, music fits with the aesthetics, and the graphics are alright. It's an okay first attempt, but it's definitely not the worst thing out there. It sets its goals low and succeeds. 10. London Loop. This one and New York were pretty neck and neck. They're very interchangeable, but they roughly match each other in track design, although both of them are pretty mediocre. But London does have the better gimmicks, such as the chomps going around, and London Bridge opening and closing, like, again, Delfino Square. It is a somewhat large track and it has enough stuff to not make it bland and boring. The song, however, is hilariously unfitting, but on its own it's really not that great either. But from now on the tracks will get a massive boost in quality, starting with 9. Rome Avanti. Let's be honest, the only really memorable thing about this track is the Colosseum, but for good reason, because it's really fun to go through. But the rest of the track is no slouch either. Like for example, the graphics, they're on point. It may be the most aesthetically pleasing track with the exception of one other. The map is actually very well designed and adapted greatly from Tour, which is something that other tracks learn from, you know. Most turns work properly and the jumps make you feel like a boss blazing through at tremendously high speeds through the streets. When you reach the Colosseum again, you can trick through the bumps, but you have to avoid the chomps, creating a risk and reward mechanic. And there are a ton of monuments. None of them slow down the race, though it's a bit overshadowed by the other city track that was released at the same time as this one. But this is where the city tracks get good. 8. Berlin Byways. We've got to make one thing loud and clear. This song absolutely slaps. Okay, now that we got that clear, best way to describe this track is basically Moonview Highway in daytime. The speeds you can get in this track are absolutely insane. The gimmick of this track is having ongoing traffic, which it may have been used in other tracks like Mushroom City, Shroom Ridge, and Woohoo Loop, all varying from good to fantastic even, except Toad's Turnpike. The one funny thing that this track does have are whomps. What do I mean by this? Well, this is actually the only Mario Kart track in existence with whomps, which is just bizarre. But the height you can get from them is absolutely insane. 7. Amsterdam Drift. This track has got some nice vibes. It's really colourful for a city track. It uses the underwater gimmick the best out of any city track, utilising a lot of alternate routes under the water canals. Visually, it never gets boring and it never stays on the road section for too long. Also, the track's name does not lie, because the turns you have to make successfully are extremely tricky to pull off successfully. Personally, my favourite part of the track is the first lap when you go to the windmill section. This track is consistently great. The art style and the use of colour is really great here. I have no complaints. 6. Athens Dash. This barely counts as a city track as it composes of 0 modern monuments, comprising exclusively from ancient Greek architecture. And that was probably the best decision they could have made, because it very much stands out compared to the rest of the lineup. However, this track suffers a lot graphically, as half the time everything looks like cardboard. The track layout is very vertical, and the height you get from each jump is very exhilarating. And in the ending section of lap 2 and 3, there's this big staircase with pillars to avoid, and the faster you go, the harder it is to avoid the pillars. But when you successfully avoid them, it is really rewarding. The track is full of optional routes and shortcuts. The third lap is especially great, as you can climb the mountain head on from the bottom to the top, avoiding big boulders, going inside caves, flying through half pipes. I don't know what I was thinking when I said this track was bad. I was extremely wrong. 5. Los Angeles laps. Complete glow up compared to New York. It is way bigger, way more expansive, and way more fun. First lap you go straight to the beach, and then downtown LA. Then out of nowhere, baseball arena. And that's probably the closest you're going to get to a Mario baseball game on the Switch. The best lap is the third lap, but they certainly could have chosen something a bit better to represent LA, because the oil field just seems like something that doesn't picture LA in a positive light. But to be honest, what pictures LA in a positive light nowadays? The oil field is very spacious, making it a very good place to use mushroom cuts through the off-road. The music has finally been fixed and fits the track perfectly. I'm a fan of the seaside city theme in games and real life. This track is overall great to drive on, and it never gets boring. 4. Sydney Sprint. The first truly excellent city course. Also, do I have to mention the music and how good it is? No, because you already knew that. The track is just fun to drive on, and the seaside city theme is very charming. Most tracks have that moment where you want to say, oh god, can we skip this part, please? Well, this one does not. There's not many tracks that successfully do this, including the ones in the top spots. This track is consistently fantastic, and you can go to the Opera House, Luna Park, Sydney Harbour Bridge, and many more, and they transition between each other perfectly. This and the next 3 are genuine S tiers, but third place goes to 3. Vancouver Velocity. Again, the soundtrack. Need I say more? This is the only snow track, and man does it use this concept to the best of its ability. First up alone keeps this track in the top 3. The winter wilderness just sparks joy to me, and the bridge segment is done perfectly. You can potentially take some very risky jumps from one side of the bridge to the other. This is also the only track with an extensive use of anti-gravity in the bridge segment. You can't fall off, but it still feels nerve-wracking to drive through. Park section has potential to do some crazy shortcuts, and the Rogers Arena was a charming addition. Even though the final lap is not as fun as the rest, it's still a banger track. But now, place your bets on number 1, because it's certainly not. 2. Madrid Drive. The final Tour City track to ever be made. And man, what a way to go. Holy shit, comparing this to Paris Promenade is like night and day. The detail in each area is second to none, and the amount of landmarks is absolutely nuts. You can go to the train station, the park, the Alhambra, the Plaza Mayor, the museum, the football stadium. The best thing is, it never feels over-bloated or boring. Everything is extremely well designed. Whoever made this track deserves a promotion. Graphically, this track looks really great. The gliding portion is perfectly located, and the size of the track is just right. Also, if you didn't know, Spain is my country of origin, and seeing it represented in Mario Kart just feels really nice. And it being so incredible is the icing on that delicious, beautiful cake. Also, the music slaps. All 3 of them. Subjectively, this track would be my number 1. However, there's this one other track that is slightly better than this one. If you kept count of each track, you know it, you love it. It's Singapore Speedway. Yeah, there was no question about this. The track is second to none. This is the best looking, colourful and eye-catching city track. The track is absolutely humongous, possibly the biggest. However, not a single moment in this adventure gets tedious. No area gets underutilized or overutilized. The track also lives to its namesake because, man, is this track fast. And the music. What hasn't been said about the music? The various laps mechanic is used the absolute best here. It has open flying areas. You can go to the top of the Marina Bay Sands Hotel. You can ride around the neon trees. It wasn't even close. Madrid may be my personal favourite, but objectively, it's no contest. Singapore will probably always be the undeniable king of all city tracks.